When a flame contacts cotton, the reaction is immediate. The fibers incinerate into ash in a fraction of a second. In his 17th discussion, the 11th century scholar Al-Ghazali identified a specific limitation in this event. Observation points to concomitant occurrence, not combined occurrence. We are tracing the logic of the incoherence of the philosophers to see how Al-Ghazali used Aristotelian logic to separate empirical observation from logical necessity. Al-Ghazali's argument establishes a boundary for physical laws, isolating the act of witnessing an event from the proof of its cause. Historical narratives often frame medieval Islamic thought as a binary struggle between faithful theologians, or kalam, and rationalist philosophers, known as the Falasifa. This narrative relies on the tension between Al-Ghazali's Tahafut and the counter-arguments of Averroes. Because Averroes was widely translated into Latin, his perspective defined how European scholars viewed Al-Ghazali for centuries. Al-Ghazali's method was built on apodoxis, the Aristotelian standard for absolute demonstration. He used these formal rules to show that the philosophers were making claims their own logic could not support. Al-Ghazali naturalized Aristotelian logic into Islamic theology by stripping away its unproven metaphysical assumptions. This represents the Avicennian universe. The first cause cascades energy downward through a rigid hierarchy of celestial intellects to our world. If a physical rule is historically true every time it's observed, Avicenna treats it as logical necessity. Here, the flame is the absolute necessity for the cotton's destruction. Because they always appear together, they seem incapable of separation. But Al-Ghazali notes, while we see the flame and ash, we cannot see the link of necessity itself. The Falasifa have treated a consistent empirical observation as if it were a mathematical certainty. Without that mathematical link, the rigid structure of the Avicennian universe allows for alternative logical possibilities. Al-Ghazali shifts the definition of possibility away from historical timelines and into mental conceivability. This is synchronic modality. If the mind can conceive an alternative state without logical contradiction, the current state is contingent, not necessary. Al-Ghazali tests this with extreme examples, such as a person feeling satiety without eating, or surviving a severed neck. Applied to our example, we can conceive of a world where fire touches cotton and the cotton simply does not burn. Because these alternative worlds are conceivable, the specific rules of our world are the result of a prior, deliberate choice by a first cause. This preserves the concept of a creator as an undetermined determinator who selected our physical laws from a matrix of possibilities. By decoupling physical laws from logical necessity, Al-Ghazali permits two different mechanisms for how the universe functions. The first of these mechanisms is known as occasionalism. In this model, God creates the universe frame by frame. He creates the fire in one moment and creates the combustion in the next moment, independently and side by side. The predictability of physics is defined as a divine habit, or sunnah. God chooses to stamp these frames in a consistent, habitual pattern. Occasionalism maintains absolute divine omnipotence while providing an orderly universe for scientific study. Al-Ghazali's second approach is contingent secondary causality, which allows for physical natures and causal links. This model suggests that human science has simply not yet mapped all the intermediary causes connecting one event to another. Al-Ghazali uses the miracle of Moses' staff to illustrate this. We trace a natural chain. Wood decays to earth feeds plants feed herbivores, and herbivores are consumed by snakes. A miracle occurs when an unknown catalyst accelerates this chain, compressing years of transformation into seconds. Under this model, miracles do not break the laws of nature. They utilize variables that remain beyond human comprehension. Between occasionalism and secondary causality, Al-Ghazali does not state which is the definitive mechanics of the universe. He treats them as come-possible, meaning both are valid because they result in the same physical reality. To a human observer, the inquiring wayfarer, a frame-by-frame occasionalist universe looks identical to a universe driven by continuous causal links. Since the Quran states that there is no change in God's habit, the consistency of nature remains a reliable foundation for science, regardless of the underlying metaphysical mechanism. In his later, more systematic works, Al-Ghazali masterfully described the cosmos through the metaphor of a meticulously engineered, massive water clock. The first stage is judgment, the theoretical blueprint within God's knowledge. Next is the decree, the physical construction of that blueprint at a specific point in time. The final stage is predestination, or qadar, the measured supply of energy that keeps the mechanism in motion. By separating logical necessity from empirical observation, Al-Ghazali established a framework where scientific inquiry and theology could coexist. The incoherence of the philosophers advanced a nominalist critique of causality that predates similar developments in 14th century Europe.